I parked in the right place in your driveway, or am I blocking somebody who needs to leave? Small details make massive differences. And this is what the really great brands in the world do right, is that they get the details right, but they do it time and time again because they've installed systems to be extremely consistent. People trust organic results a lot more. And that's not something that AI is going to change. I would argue that if anything, AI is just going to accelerate that. It's going to take the credibility that people have put the measurement on autopilot. Focus your creative energy on things that are more important and stop trying to be a marketer if you're not, because that's okay. It's okay to say that this isn't an area of expertise for me and to lean on other people.
The technician at the end of the day is really the one who should be responsible for making sure that they're providing that 5-star experience. And more importantly, collecting the review, right? Because as soon as they leave the house, that's a lost opportunity that, hopefully we can get them to respond, with a series of text messages, things along those lines, right? Hello, friends. I'm Adam Loveridge, and welcome to the Home Services Marketing Podcast, From Growth to Acquisition. I'm the owner and founder of Blue Forge Marketing. We are a home services marketing agency specializing in heating and air conditioning, plumbing, remodeling, and garage door contractors. For more information about Blue Forge Marketing, visit us online at blueforgemarketing.com. Hello and welcome to the Home Services Marketing Podcast, From Growth to Acquisition. My name is Adam Loveridge with Blue Forge Marketing, and today I'm really excited. We're going to be doing a kind of a feature on HVAC marketing in particular. I have a guest joining me here today, Tom Rand with Climate Care. Tom, thanks so much for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure, Adam. Thanks very much for having me.
My pleasure as well. So Tom is the member marketing and implementation manager for Climate Care. That's quite the title, Tom. Tell me more about that.
It's a mouthload for sure. I'm not the first person to stumble on it, and I always get questions about it. It's an interesting job. I guess we could start by maybe explaining that Climate Care is a cooperative, and it's important to understand that because my job is not directly in an HVAC business so much as it is on an oversight group that is the head office for 30 independently owned and operated HVAC companies. So it puts me in a bit of a unique seat. So my job as member marketing manager is to really help those 30 companies with marketing, acting as their coach, as their liaison. And the implementation side is really more on management and operations and leverages some of my past experience. And particularly at Climate Care, we're very big on EOS culturally, and I'm sure we'll get into a little bit of this in some time, but it's a nice job that allows me to really make practical strides in marketing beyond just the esoteric that we see a lot of folks doing. It really ties into the management and operations, and we like to see that level of traction.
I'm really excited about this because I think with you really managing or overseeing rather the marketing for 30 different heating and air conditioning companies, obviously analytics is something that you are, knee deep in every single day of the week. And I think you've probably seen it all from a marketing perspective in terms of heating and air and really know what works and what doesn't, what's coming in, what's going out. And so I'm real excited to kind of just sit and go through all of that. But you mentioned though, Tom, that you have some, experience on the operational side of things. How did you get started in HVAC marketing and wind up kind of where you are now?
Yeah, it's my boss, Victor, likes to say that HVAC, there's only two ways into that industry. And it's either that you're holding your dad's flashlight when you're a kid or you were lied to. Here, answer the phone for a month. And then all of a sudden, you're in with your partner and you own one of these companies. And I seem to be that rare third group of people where neither of those things happened to me. I was in a spot where I had just left a job as a general manager at a large electronics store. And I was looking for something new. And I had taken a couple of months to spend some time with my kids while they were doing kindergarten at the dining room table, like so many of us those years ago. And I was approached on LinkedIn by the owner of a local HVAC company that had quite a good reputation and was a very good business. It's been around almost 50 years. And he said, we're looking to grow. And we're looking for somebody who can help us with the management of this. And I said, I probably couldn't tell you an Allen wrench from a screwdriver. And he's like, that's okay. If you're good with business and P&L and people management, that's what we need. We have somebody here who really understands this business. We're focused on growing. We need somebody who can help us with the operations. And I said, great. And so that was May 2021. And I took my first job as the branch manager at Walker Climate Care in Cornwall, Ontario. Had a great mentor in the owner, George, and in the general manager, Kyle, to learn about the business and learn about the industry, which we did very, very quickly. And we grew the business, and we ended up buying another one not too long later in the national capital in Ottawa. This business was multidiscipline. It did HVAC, it did plumbing. And at that point, or shortly thereafter, my job got shifted. So I was no longer the head of operations or head of branch at Walker, but a regional manager, really focused in on marketing and IT for both companies. And that's really where the journey began and the beginning of how I ended up here at Climate Care head office.
Fantastic. And tell me a little bit more. I mean, in the United States here, at least, we're not familiar with HVAC co-ops. Obviously the big trend here is that private equity is rolling, things up, and obviously, companies acquire companies, that sort of thing. So talk to me a little bit more about Climate Care and kind of what Climate Care really does, if you will, on behalf of its members.
So that really focuses in on what we would call the 4 core pillars. So there's marketing, which obviously is my favorite pillar, but there's training, there's purchasing, and there's peer support. So through those 4 pillars, we're able to really drive value to independently owned and operated HVAC businesses that join our group. And they can be strategic members, meaning that they're branded. So it could be Adams Climate Care, or it could be something else. It could be Adams Plumbing and Heating, and you've had this business in your local market for 30 years. You're not willing to change the name or branding. People recognize it. It resonates in the community, and you want to maintain that legacy. So Climate Care is a great place to be able to do that. What we're really good at doing is helping people get from a certain size to that next level. And, there's a world of HVAC contractors out there who they're certainly more than just the chuck in a truck. They've grown their business from one person to hire an apprentice or 2 or 5 or maybe 10. And, maybe you're sitting around that $2 million mark, and it becomes really hard to scale from there because, what got you here won't get you there. So you think about what you needed to hire your first apprentice, and then what you needed to be able to have somebody answer the phone. And now when you start hitting, 10, 11 employees, you need an HR department, and you need a marketing plan, and you need to be able to grow. And now your competitors are paying attention to you, and the things that you need to be relevant and to be competitive are no longer the same. Well, it turns out that we're a group who's really good at that. So if you're interested in moving your business from 2 to 3 or 5 or 10 or $15 million, that's the space that we excel in. We really have the skills and expertise and tools to be able to help you grow your business to that space.
Well, and I really, really wish that this was something, frankly, that was, here in the U.S., because I think that you're doing a very good thing. And obviously there's training organizations out there like Next Star Network and things along those lines that, certainly that I'm aware of. But what really I think has impressed me most about Climate Care is I've listened to you and both Victor talk about Climate Care in general. Obviously, aside from the marketing and the support and the purchasing and everything else, you guys have this really unique strategy for companies who are building to sell, right? Who do want to exit. And usually I'll talk about this at the end of our podcast when we're talking directly with an owner, like what is the exit strategy? But tell us more a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, just to, for my own edification and for those of our listeners, how Climate Care works around acquisitions.
Yeah. So maybe we could take just a step back and explain maybe why the inception of this program was so critical to us, because what we were finding, Climate Care has been around, well over 30 years now. And what would happen is our best members would grow and follow the guiding principles and do all of the right things and become, a very large, successful business. And then they would get poached by PE. And if that's your exit strategy, that's great. If you want to just sell your business to somebody else and retire, fantastic. You've certainly earned that. And I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from that. I will say, if you do fall into a different camp of people who would like to preserve your legacy in the community, keep your business name, see that your staff is protected long-term, and see that thing continue to grow, but still be able to retire, then there's a different opportunity. So what we noticed was that we needed to provide something in that space. And that was the inception of the Navigator program. So Navigator is a program that allows members of Climate Care who have businesses in good standing to be able to be acquired by the co-op. And this is why it's so important to understand that climate care is cooperative in nature. So the money that we would derive as the owners of this business goes back to all of our members anyhow. It's a for-profit co-op, but being owned by the members, everything we do is always in alignment with the best interests of our members, and we're governed by them through the board of directors. So it's a very, very unique opportunity that allows people to have an exit plan that respects their legacy and continues on enriching other climate care members, their peers and friends that they've come to know and love over the last many years.
Yeah, I really think that what you're doing there is cool, and I've heard just recently on another podcast about similar type things that are happening, at least here in the U.S. In this particular case, it was with garage doors in a group called Guild. But the short of it is that I foresee a time in the future, here in the United States at least, where we're going to see more of these types of companies where it's a conglomerate, if you will, or a handful of these, be it garage doors or HVAC or plumbers or whatever else, coming together and saying, we still want to stay privately owned, but we want all of these additional benefits that PE could bring to the table in terms of capitalization, marketing, systemization, purchasing, whatever else. And I think that that's going to happen more and more. And so I'm glad that we're talking about it, but to kind of segue into what I think that we're really here to talk about, which is marketing. One of the things that you had mentioned was the word marketing plan. And I really want to start there, I think, Tom, because I think that it is very, very common for the chuck in a truck, as you put it, right? We call them one man in a van sometimes. But, when you're just getting started, we're very heavy word of mouth. And then and then you go grab another technician or two and you realize that word of mouth isn't only going to take you so far. And now it's time to market. And I think that a lot of companies tend to take this spray and pray approach to things, right? Where it's just like, let's throw everything against the wall. Let's see what sticks. And you're often disappointed when only a few things stick, right? As opposed to maybe sticking with something and seeing it all the way through. And so talk to me about how you go about developing a marketing plan with your member companies and what some of those things entail.
Yeah. And there's so much to talk about here. So I'll definitely need you to guide this and make sure that we stay on the rails. I think one of the things that we see companies that are reasonably mature doing a really bad job of is actually forgetting where they started and doing that word of mouth and installing a very robust referral program and mining their internal customer database. We see so much interest in, oh my goodness, the phone isn't ringing. Let's throw thousands of dollars at Google and find strangers who potentially might meet our core values and want to do business with us. That's craziness. It's not a terrible strategy to supplement your existing customer base, but to forget about the thousands of customers that you've served over the years and done a good job with and are happy with you is craziness to me. It's so much faster and less expensive to focus on that I think we really need to be disciplined about making sure that people don't lose track of that. And to your point, this is where we segue into having a marketing plan. I had heard recently on another seminar that I was on that a failure to plan is a plan to fail. And I loved that. I thought it was very insightful, maybe cliche, but it's still true. And I think marketing is a really good example of that, where people don't really have a marketing plan. To your point, it's very much, let's just throw spaghetti everywhere and see where the noodles kind of end up. And it's a terrible, terrible idea, because you would never treat any of your other business operations that way. You would never say, just send the guy out to the house and let's see what happens. You would say, let's make sure that they've got the right skills. Let's make sure it's equipment that we're licensed to work on. Let's make sure that we've got the right tools in the van, and make sure that we're going where the customer wants us to at the right time and set an appointment. So why do all of those best practices that, make a great service department or a great install department or a great call center operation suddenly not apply in the business of let's go find new customers and let's generate business from them? So I think that it starts with this fundamental kind of recognition that marketing is not this knee-jerk activity that you do when the phones stop ringing. It's a purposeful, planned thing that you're constantly doing to make sure that you don't end up in that emergency spot.
Sure. Well, I think too that having a solidified marketing plan will take you so far, But the reality is that if you really consider, let's take Google as an example, right? We know that in their Maps algorithm in particular, this thing is heavily, heavily review based at this point. And I'll wing out percentages sometimes of what I feel that really, boils down to. But I think that one of the things where companies also fail to plan and plan to fail is how they're going to weave their marketing into the company culture. The technician at the end of the day is really the one who should be responsible for making sure that they're providing that 5-star experience. And more importantly, collecting the review, right? Because as soon as they leave the house, that's a lost opportunity that, hopefully we can get them to respond, with a series of text messages, things along those lines, right? But I think culture and what I love about talking about marketing plans is that, I think it needs to really become part of the culture of that organization. And I do think that you made a point earlier as well as, hey, we start out doing all of these things, mining our own database, right? Semi-annual tune-ups is going to be another big thing that I think that is when I see a company, struggling and they're wholly focused on lead generation. The question that I'm asking is, well, what are the systems that you're using to book your tune-ups in the spring and the fall? And oftentimes it's, well, we get on the phone and we start calling our members and but what about the other 4,000 clients that you've developed over the last, 20 years in business? What's happening there? And so maybe talk to me a little bit more about what types of activities, systems, that sort of thing, do you typically like to include into a marketing plan?
Yeah, there's quite a bit there. And I think you've got to appreciate that nothing is going to work 100% effectively and nothing is going to work overnight. So there needs to be some sort of patience. And this ties back to the point about how do you integrate marketing into your business. And it starts with making sure that everybody is on the same page. It's funny when I've sat in a lot of leadership meetings in my life where people are saying, everyone seems to have an opinion about marketing. I like this brand. I love this type of advertising. I don't like this. And it reminds me a lot of this brilliant article that was written called The Death of Expertise. And there was this time that we just acknowledged that people who have expertise and have, education and experience in a field have an opinion that matters more than other people in the room. So if you're a senior US government policy expert, if we're going to talk about policy, what you have to say matters a lot more than me. Marketing, that all seems to go out the window and everybody seems to feel like they're on equal footing, and it's just not necessarily true. So getting to some sort of consensus that this is how we're going to build our plan. This is what kind of results we can expect. And everybody can be a stakeholder, but one person really does need to drive that bus. We need to agree early on, what are we anticipating? What do we need for an ROI or an ROAS in this department? How are we going to agree and align upon what works? So what we don't want to do is send people out into the field making decisions and spending money and starting marketing campaigns. And then they come back after 90 days and they're like, Adam, I can't wait to show you this. I'm so excited. We killed it. And you're like, that's not what we talked about. Those aren't the results that we aligned upon. Like, those need to be determined well ahead of time so that you can pivot and adjust your marketing plan as you go. It's not meant to be scribed in a stone tablet. It is meant to be flexible because there is a subjective part about marketing. But the analytics and the basic parts of like what's working and what's not, when are we going to pull the plug, when are we going to double down and invest more in what is working, needs to be foundational and needs to be aligned upon from the highest level of leadership all the way down to the organization. And that's another critical error that we see all the time, is that these marketing plans get hatched in a boardroom, but nobody bothers to tell the call center folks about what promotions we're running and what kind of customers we're looking for. We don't tell the technicians what kind of experiences we're trying to share with our customers. And when things get disjointed like that, it's the customer who falls through the cracks and things really get disconnected and you don't deliver on the promise that you were hoping for. And that's a very, very rapid way to erode trust in a brand, is to just under deliver.
I really like that. And we talk about brands quite a bit. I've said over and over again on this podcast that if you're going to focus really on one thing or maybe two things, is number one, get reviews, and number two, build a brand. Because we see where the amount of brand traffic to a website affects really everything else. And you know, I think building a brand is so big. And there was something else that you said too that I want to kind of circle in and hit a little bit deeper here. And it has to do with, you know, analytics for sure, but also measuring performance on campaigns. And the other night I was at a mastermind event for bunch of HVAC, plumbing, you know, home service type contractors, but it was predominantly HVAC and plumbing companies that showed up to this. And it was interesting because there was a group there that was talking about Service Titan and KPIs and things along these lines, and the subject of ROAS came up. And really the main question was, when we pick up, let's say, somebody from Google Ads, right, as a client, once they're in the fold, so to speak, should we then be classifying them as a returning customer, or should we keep them classified as that original source attribution of Google Ads? And, you know, and my feeling on this is that if we're just looking at the front end return on ad spend, particularly with something like Google Ads that is getting more and more expensive, especially as we're getting just more money that's being dumped into that system, and you neglect the opportunity, or you neglect really then the reality, in my opinion, that when it comes to HVAC, when it comes to plumbing, when it comes to these types of service companies, part of that marketing plan has to include how we're going to stay out in front of those customers. Because the thing that I love about HVAC is it's just like going to the dentist, right? You're going to be in there twice a year if you're doing it right and everything else. And so I'm curious about how you look at issues like this, and whether or not you're looking more at the lifetime value of you know, what's coming through to really determine what return on investment looks like. Is there a cutoff in there where, okay, now they've moved from being a Google Ads customer to a returning customer? What are your thoughts on that, Tom?
Yeah, this is a really big one because it seems to be a very emotional issue. I'm sure that there were some very contentious views in that mastermind event that you were at. It's astonishing to me that there isn't a stronger alignment on this kind of thinking, where people will say, you know, Tom clicked on my Google ad, 4 years ago, and that's how I found this guy. And then I went out and I did a service job. And they'll say, well, therefore, the lifetime value of Tom as a customer should be attributed to that one Google ad. And I've never heard something more insane in my entire life. You think about it, the question isn't, how did we find Tom? The question is, why did Tom call us today? Right? And there might be 10 different reasons that I call you throughout a year. It might be, and hopefully you hope to get your customer to that raving fan status where you're on speed dial, they're recommending you to their friends, they would never consider anyone else. And as soon as something comes up in a discipline that you're skilled in, you're getting a phone call. But the reality is that it takes time to build raving fans, and you're not always going to get there. Sometimes people are just going to be transactional. When it's 11:30 at night and there's, 2 feet of snow on the ground, not everybody is going to go look at their furnace for the nice sticker that you spent $3 to print and put on it. They're going to go to Google and they're going to say, furnace repair now. And the first person who shows up at the top of the list that says open and has a decent star rating, guess what? That's now their customer, and it's theirs to lose moving forward. So I think it comes back to acknowledging the fact that it takes multiple times to really make someone your customer. If they're not your membership customer and you don't have every piece of equipment in that house, uniquely on a plan with you, that's not your customer. You're just the most recent person who was there. And I think it's important to acknowledge that there's a lot of different ways that customers are going to communicate. So sometimes that's clicking on a Google ad, or that could be clicking on an organic search result, or reading a newsletter. It could be a piece of direct mail. It could be listening to this podcast. Like, we don't know where every customer is, but we do know that they're not all in the exact same places. Some people love social networks because it's proof, Adam likes this company. Well, I like Adam. He's got a good head on his shoulders. I can probably take that recommendation with less salt than, something else from a stranger. So trying to create revenue attribution that always focuses back to the Nexus event or the first time that you met somebody will just never make sense to me, because it's almost like saying, why would we ever do any more marketing once we get a customer once? And it tells me that you fundamentally don't understand the customer journey about how they get back out of that loop and back into the consideration phase again. You need to be in front of them. If you really believed that, why would you write newsletters? Why would you have a podcast? Why would you update your website with new information? Why would you have social media and share things every couple of days? Those are the proofs that people need engagement to be able to be top of mind. And to your point, there is almost no industry in the world that is less top of mind than HVAC, until the second that something goes wrong and it's the only thing you can think about, because it's, 79 degrees inside your house and it's supposed to be 72.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think if I'm hearing you right then, Tom, what you're kind of saying when it comes to attribution and different things along these lines is that it's like, it really doesn't matter how you get somebody through the door. And whether we're calculating lifetime value from that Google ad or however we look at it, one way or another, the name of the game is to consistently market to your database, as well as continue to bring new leads through the door, so that we're making sure that we're consistently on this growth path and we're retaining as many, I think, of those customers as possible. I think what I'm hearing you say is that it needs to be more of a comprehensive type of strategy, first and foremost. And more importantly, and I guess maybe this just is how I look at it as well. But one of the mistakes that I think people make in this particular industry is that they look at a lead generation campaign in particular, and geez, our ROAS was only 2-to-1. That's not a very good ROI, right? But I think that if we have the ability to really look at, once again, what is that lifetime value? Then I think that it really gives us an opportunity to weight those campaigns against the practical. Are they bringing in enough profit on the front end to keep it as a reasonable and justifiable campaign? But then how are we looking at it on the back end? And I guess maybe the question that I'm really trying to get to here, with you, Tom, is that what advice then would you give somebody when it comes to really analyzing these campaigns and determining whether or not they stay in the marketing mix or not, or things along those lines?
The start, I think, is really setting up those parameters and those goals ahead of time and getting the leadership alignment around that. And then measuring is such an important piece. And you hinted at it, but I think we should just come out and say it, that it's not easy to measure digital marketing all the time. There are a lot of people out there who are just lost in this space. They don't understand the acronyms. They don't get the game. The tools are changing every couple of months. There's something new. AI has been a major disruptor in this space. So unless you have a really good handle on this game, it's going to be very difficult for you to determine whether this is working or not. And we see a lot of frustration with this. And I think it's especially true in home services. You're dealing with people who primarily have grown up with tools and practical hands-on skills. So when you start talking about revenue attribution and, impression share, these are not things that are natively understood to this group. And that's okay. But there are things out there, there are people and tools that can help make sense of this to you. And I guess I would say that it's very akin to investing. So investing is not something that I am an expert in at all. I do not have an economics degree, and I'm not interested in spending a lot of time on that. But I do understand that if I make smart investments and I get the return I'm looking for, that's exactly why I've hired that investment firm, and they're doing the things, they know what's going on inside of these companies where they're shifting money to be able to bring back to me. And that's what I want. And that's kind of the function of your internal marketing person or the agency or agencies that you choose to work with. So just be clear on what the expectation is. If you're locking away money for 10 years and you want it to be 100%, guaranteed, you're not going to get a great return. Marketing can be very much the same. You can make some bold plays and maybe it's going to work for you and maybe it doesn't, but you have to be able to accept those risks. And if you're not, then just find a marketing strategy or partner that's more aligned with what you're doing, but be clear on the measurement. There's a really good tool, and I know you know about this one, and I don't want to be evangelical about this, but what Kevin Lesage and the folks at Searchlight are doing is just absolutely revolutionary in this space. And I can't encourage people enough. If you're not familiar with this tool, go check it out. This is a really, really interesting piece that takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. It takes all of the numbers, it crunches them with just a massive amount of compute power. And it really puts marketing into very plain English terms for people of, I gave this thing $5. How much did it bring back to me? And there's no guesswork because it lives in Service Titan. It lives right in your CRM. You don't have to worry about it. Put the measurement on autopilot. Focus your creative energy on things that are more important and stop trying to be a marketer if you're not, because that's okay. It's okay to say that this isn't an area of expertise for me and to lean on other people.
Yeah, I really, really like that a lot. And, most recently we've been digging into Searchlight on behalf of some of our clients as well. And it really is a fantastic tool to be able to, I think, develop that attribution, really know whether or not marketing campaigns are performing. And I think that you really hit the nail on the head earlier when you're talking about the fact that this is something that if you're going to do as a business, not if, but you have to, right? We all have to market, but ultimately understanding what that marketing is doing and how everything crosses over and interplays with one another and what attribution reporting really is and how to, clearly try to associate, if you will, revenue to those things. I mean, there's some incredible tools that are coming out. But for the most part, I think our blue collar HVAC owners, different things along these lines don't get it, and maybe don't get it, but it is such a broad field, right? And we talk about all these different acronyms, and most certainly, in my opinion, one of the most complicated marketing strategies that companies absolutely have to have is SEO. And I would caveat that by saying SEO/AIO now, because you're right, AI is absolutely changing the marketing landscape, I think, as we know it. It's become, 2 years ago, I wouldn't have gone and put much energy or effort into making sure that we're showing up in ChatGPT when people are looking for an HVAC contractor, or they're doing research and that sort of thing. Now it's almost imperative. And I think as more and more search is going to AI agents and research is being done that way. And so let's talk about SEO, I think, in particular. And this is obviously a subject that's near and dear to my heart. But what would you tell HVAC contractors about just SEO in general, how important it is to be showing up in organic search that in your local maps, and what some of maybe the pitfalls are that you've seen as you manage 30 different HVAC companies marketing, in as far as it comes down to search engine optimization.
Yeah. So it's absolutely critical. I can't understate this. When people are looking, whether it's on a mobile device or on a desktop computer, when they're searching for something, if you're not on the front page, you're dead. I think most people have already kind of established that. And unless you're a research scientist who's really digging into this, or you're one of those types of consumers who need 17 competing reviews before you buy a pair of sneakers, I think you get it. It's a foregone conclusion for a lot of these people. This is how their personal behavior is. So why would you not carry that knowledge with you into your business acumen, right? You want to be top three. You want to be in the sponsored ads. You want to be in LSA. You need to be in MapPack, but you need to be in the top of the SERP, or the organic results, because there are people who put a lot more weight on that than others. So some of those people are the people who just don't trust sponsored ads as much, and you can now hide those. That's a new feature. So showing up in organic, you can't hide those results. It's very important that you're there. But for those of us who understand how the algorithm helps prioritize, SEO is kind of the linchpin to everything else, right? We know that having more Google reviews, more recent Google reviews, where you show up is so critical, because there's this halo effect that what you do well in one space will help reverberate across others. And organic is the tougher one. You can't just buy your way to the top of that list. You've got to produce quality content. It's got to be well written. It has to be technically crawlable by the engines to be able, and the engines are changing, to your point. All of those things have to align, and that's not something that's going to happen overnight, and it's certainly not something that's going to happen by accident. All the same, it is, incredibly important that you play well in this space, because it comes down to credibility. There are a lot of companies out there who would love to just buy ad space and do, but when people see that they're not showing up near the top of those organic results, it affects their credibility. People are saying in their head, I think they're just putting an ad there. I don't know if they're really as good as they say. But people trust organic results a lot more. And that's not something that AI is going to change. I would argue that if anything, AI is just going to accelerate that. It's going to take the credibility that people have built by having large websites and having domain authority and lots of referrals. And it's going to really show those people significantly more and faster than anything else. So a good SEO game, that's the price of entry at this point. If you're not going to play that game well, I don't think you're going to really be long for this world in competition.
Well, that is, something that you and I completely can agree on. and we always put SEO first. And it's always this kind of interesting conundrum when you're talking with a company that's maybe doing $400,000 or $500,000 a year in sales. They're largely word of mouth. Maybe they've started to dabble a little bit in marketing. They probably even have a Google business profile. And we tend to, as HVAC contractors or just home service contractors in general, want to focus on leads, right? And, and so there's Home Advisor for those, or, Angie, right? I think they're now, and different lead buying services out there. And that's how a lot of, I think, contractors really get their start, is pay per lead, pay per call. Obviously, LSA has come along. And for our listeners, if LSA is an acronym, isn't something you're familiar with, I'm talking about Google Guaranteed. Okay, the ads that show reviews and whatever else. And it's funny because even a few years back, LSA, well, when I say a few, it's probably been more like 5 or 6 at this point. LSA was really starting to become a lot more known in the marketplace. They originally started rolling this out in San Francisco and areas in the close to home there at Google, and then realized, yep, this is working pretty well. And it's interesting because when it comes to LSA in particular, it was supposed to be this real land of milk and honey, right? Because I can now take my reputation as it sits, throw it up at the top of Google, and start just getting leads, right? And then very quickly, what you start realizing is that as more and more contractors come into the system, there's just less lead flow available, right? Because there's fewer things that you actually have to optimize when it comes to the local service ads with Google. You set a budget. You say, I'm willing to pay this much per lead. These are the types of leads that I want. And then you throw it out there. And the big trend that we've noticed here just over the last probably 18 months to 2 years is that if you are in LSA early, then you are still going to be able to get leads from LSA. However, if you're a new contractor and you're just hoping that you can set up LSA and sort of hit the easy button shortcut to just driving massive amounts of lead generation, you get everything set up, you go through the licensing and credentials, and you submit the background check, and then all of a sudden it's crickets for months and months and months. And what's fascinating to me now is that we're seeing where new contractors really have to throw ad budget in traditional Google ads alongside LSA to get LSA to perform. But I think back to your point in all of this, if you're not showing up organically, you still got to remember that, like guys my age, right, getting even closer to 50, we've always been taught to skip the ads. Right. And that's going to be true for LSA. It's going to be true for the sponsor results. And so we're going down to those first organic listings. And I think to your point, Tom, there is still a bunch of trust in that. But I think what people miss, and it just comes down to good old-fashioned branding and good old-fashioned marketing, and the fact that people need to be exposed to your brand an average of 6 to 7 times before they're really going to start to recognize you. And so if I'm going out and I'm in an emergency HVAC situation where, okay, furnace isn't working, we're negative digits outside and everybody's freezing indoors, I'm going to, go hit Google, right? Furnace repair near me, right? Furnace repair fast, right? Whatever that is. And if I see somebody in LSA, but I go down to those results and there's really nothing else there in maps, I can't find them organically. It's like you're definitely being able to tell that they're just putting money up into those lead gen spots. And I do think that you get skipped more. But conversely, though, how many times is somebody going to go out over a period of, say, 3 or 4 years and look at, online and whether it's we're doing a tune-up, we want duct cleaning, We're looking for air conditioning repair in the summer. We're looking for furnace repair in the winter. We're looking for a new AC system. And as they're doing that, they're seeing those organic results. They're seeing those paid results. And over time, I think that it's absolutely imperative that you have that strong organic positioning because, again, it's going to make everything perform better to where now somebody recognizes your brand. They see your LSA ad first thing. It's like, nope, I know these guys. They're trusted because I've seen them all over the search results before. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm with you 100%. And I think it pivots to a very interesting conversation around what's the difference between lead gen marketing and awareness marketing, and where do I have to slide the scale on this? And I've had a lot of conversations with contractors over the last many years in this space. So if you are a newer contractor and you're not well established in your marketplace yet, you have a good reputation and a good business, but people don't know who you are because you just started, doing a lot more awareness marketing activities is definitely a great way to be able to get that recognition so that when you do show up in search results and you've built that web presence, or that your ads are being shown to people, whether it's a Google ad or it's literally a billboard on the side of the road or it's on the radio, it doesn't really matter what the channel for conversion is. You want some sort of recognition. And I think we have to appreciate, to your point, those people with the LSA ads with nothing else, they don't have that recognition. So people aren't clicking on the ads as much. And that's why things are so quiet when they're starting up, if that's the only thing that they've chosen to prioritize. You need to do some awareness marketing. At the same time, as your business matures in its marketplace, I think it's very important to keep an eye on that and slide that scale towards things that will bring more concrete ROI into the business. So you can't, if you're 20 years in your marketplace, you don't need to sponsor 27 different little league teams. It's keep your logo and name on a couple of those jerseys for sure, because it feels good to give back as a business owner and it's helpful to be seen at the local arena. But the amount of folks that I've spoken to are like, we sponsor 42 sports teams, but we don't have LSA. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, this is not a marketing plan that anyone would sign off on.
Well, and that's really it, right? It's like hopefully you've thought these things out in advance and looked at how exactly you're going to try to corner the market, in your particular area. But I love what you have to say there, Tom, honestly. And to kind of talk a little bit more about just SEO, I want to maybe talk on a different point about that, which is working with SEO companies. And, I'm of the opinion that friends don't let friends do their own SEO because it really is just an incredibly complicated beast. And I have to suspect that you've probably seen, when it comes to digital agencies or SEO agencies, probably the good, the bad, and the ugly. And my question, to you with regard to this is, what are some of the things that you really look for when it comes to how to know whether or not you're talking with an SEO company that's, worth their salt?
Yeah, there's a lot of red flags and green flags when you're looking for folks to work with. And I think one of the ones that I find the most challenging, and this is the most common presentation, is these spammy kind of emails that say, hey, Adam, I was looking at your site and noticed this massive problem / deficiency. I've worked with, insert names of companies that they might not have permission to use, and we've generated phenomenal results. Can we call you? And the whole thing is written in plain text. There isn't an email signature with a phone number or a logo on it. Their website isn't legitimate. It's maybe sent from a personal email address, and you're like, okay, I think all of us can filter those out as being people we don't want to do business with. We are not going to trust our brand with you. And that's the thing that I think is important when you're interviewing people, is that whether you hire somebody onto your team or you hire a marketing agency for you, you're entrusting your brand to that person or to that group of people. So it's really important to do this right. And I think looking for people in this space who are patient, who are asking you questions about your objectives, who are interested in how you're going to be measured and want to meet or exceed your goals, are willing to tell you how long this is going to take, are upfront about their value and their costs. These are the kind of people that I think, those are the green flags that you're looking for, that those are the folks you want to be doing business with. When somebody comes in and says, listen, just give me $10,000 in 30 days and I will change everything, immediately we know that that's a problem. And I think that there's some very obvious red flag behavior there too. So if I ask somebody to perform an audit on my company, and they come back and they say everything is terrible. I can make everything better immediately. Just trust me, I'll fix it. And they don't tell you how. That's a real problem. Like, I'd really like to see that, when we're offering to help a company, that we're admitting what is going well. Let's be clear about the things that are going well, and let's be clear about what we're capable of changing and what might be beyond our scope, where we can say, listen, here are the things that I can do really well that will make a big difference. Here are the things that you need to do as the operator. They're going to help on this. If you keep driving around these rusty vans, or you have 3 different versions of your logo out on your fleet, that's a problem. And I can't fix that. Google can't fix that for you. That's an operational issue, but it's also a branding and a marketing thing. So having somebody who you're willing to trust, you have to get that nice kind of warm, fuzzy feeling that you want this person involved in your business. You're going to trust their recommendations. You don't have to agree with everything they say, and you don't have to do everything they tell you. But if you're not willing to give them a seat at the table, that's not the kind of person that you should be letting into your business and be trusting with something like SEO, in my opinion.
So talking here a little bit more about this, I think maybe some of the things that I would add to, you brought up doing an audit, right? And I think that that's really important, that somebody really genuinely can look at your situation and understand where it is that you're going. And I also love what you had to say about the trucks as an example, right? And in one of Dan Antonelli's books, he talks about the fact that your trucks are out there providing more impressions than probably any other form of marketing or advertising out there. And that's all a really big deal. But I think working with a company that understands, how branding, how awareness and everything else fits into SEO is really a big deal. And then I would say also, it used to be that SEO was very much a done for you type of thing, right? We'd go out, we'd write content, we'd slap them into article directories and all of these other things. And to the idea of more of having a marketing partner, over the last several years, we've really shifted things in such a way that we do more done with you type service. And I think that if you look at how Google's algorithms have molded and updated over the years, they're looking a lot more for EEAT information, right? Experience, expertise, authority, trust. We can't, I don't feel, as an organization, as an SEO company, take the knowledge, the experience, the brand, the culture, everything else that you have going on, and without your input and without your involvement, go out there and really market you guys in a cohesive way. And so I think that that's really, frankly, one of the things that I would really look for as well. And kind of to your point, if somebody comes in, well, give me 10 grand, we'll fix it. No big deal. Sit back and do nothing. The account management process, I think, is a really, really big and important thing. How often are you guys sitting down and working with your partners, because you are trusting these people with your brand. You are trusting these people with arguably the highest return on investment marketing activity that you can do when it comes to SEO. And I think that gone are the days of just being able to hire somebody who can just come in and fix it without your direct involvement. And I think that really does come back in so many more ways to this idea of, really needing a marketing plan and making sure that you have the right, vendors and partners in place to do that. And so that was just kind of my thoughts on there. I mean, I could probably go on for days about the red flags that we see with SEO companies and that sort of thing. But what do you typically recommend for an HVAC contractor in terms of, how frequently they ought to be communicating with their SEO company and really staying on the pulse of their own marketing?
Yeah, my recommendation is to have those conversations in the preliminary stage of the relationship and make sure that there's alignment there. So if you're looking to hire a firm to take care of SEO or all marketing or just a part of it, and you say, I'm willing to give you 30 minutes of my time once a week as the business operator, and that's all I can afford to give you. If that works for that agency and they can work in those parameters, great. But if they can't or they choose not to, then that's okay. And I think that you should respect that. And I think that if they push back and they tell you, we're going to need a little bit more than that, you need to be willing to make a decision around, I'm okay with devoting more time because I think I'm getting a better level of partner. Or do you get that kind of wishy-washy feeling from them that they're just saying okay and doing whatever you want because they're interested in your checkbook? So I think really understanding and explaining the why you need that much time can be very important, and being clear about what it does require. It comes back to that, get the tools and measurements in place and determine what success looks like first, and then start working recursively to try to get a place there and figure out what kind of resource allocation you were going to do. One thing I'll add, and it's not specifically on this point, but we didn't really talk about it, is just looking for those kind of indicators that your marketing is working from an organic sense. So the amount of times that call center teams don't dig deep enough, like, how did you find out about us? Google. Awesome. That's like the existing customer campaign. You could put 99% of your customers there, and it doesn't really tell you anything tangible that as a business owner or operator that you can use to action. So those measurement tools become very important. But even looking at the organic signs of how things are working, and I'll give you a perfect example. So we're going back, it's around 2022. I'm writing a column in the local newspaper in our small community. It's maybe 50,000 people, maybe 120 if you include all the rural area around it. And it was around the home. So things that could help homeowners. So I was writing about heat pumps and how this is, great technology for folks, or what the carbon tax was, which is a Canadian thing that maybe a very small amount of your, podcasters will understand. But people came in. I remember once a gentleman came in and he said, "I'm looking to speak with Tom Rand. He's the heat pump expert." So I come out of my office and I talk with this guy, and I'm like, I didn't know how to tell him. I'm like, listen, I've never brazed or welded or installed a refrigerant system in my entire life. I just write the articles, man. But it gave me this very clear sense that this is working, right? Like, people are reading these articles. And if you can find the time to talk to your customers, a lot of them are willing to tell you absolutely everything you're doing wrong and all of the things that are going right. You just need to be willing to listen, and you need to be willing to take that feedback. But there's a lot of evidence there that it's very anecdotal. But people will tell you, I was so impressed when you showed up and, your uniforms were clean, and that the gentleman asked, "Am I parked in the right place in your driveway, or am I blocking somebody who needs to leave?" Small details make massive differences. And this is what the really great brands in the world do right, is that they get the details right, but they do it time and time again because they've installed systems to be extremely consistent.
Well, I think even just circling back to SEO, right? If we don't have systems for consistently producing content, again, if my idea is, well, we've hired somebody to handle all of this, so now, we're good, but you're not really taking that knowledge base, if you will, and relaying that to partners. So one of the books that I really love out there is called "They Ask You Answer." And off the top of my head, I'm having a blank on who exactly wrote that, but it's something that we have utilized pretty extensively with our own clientele, because the whole idea behind it is that you're talking to your customers, right? You're talking with sales, you're talking with those front end technicians that are running the service calls and making recommendations for installations or various products and things along those lines. And you're finding out, what are the biggest common objections that we're getting from people? What are the questions that we're getting over and over and over again? And you talk about systems, right? And I think that having a system to consistently stay on the pulse of your customer base and answer those questions that they have, provide that transparency, right? I see more and more now companies talking about what it costs on their website, right? As opposed to dodging that. Well, let's come out and do a free estimate for you. And even just giving ranges, I think, is such a big deal. And I would take that back to a criteria that I think is really important when you're evaluating an SEO company, which is, how transparent are they? Do you have an idea of where your money is actually going in these campaigns, right? Are you getting reports on the links that are being built? Are you getting reports on the content that's being generated? Are you seeing whether or not they're posting the GBP and including all of your imagery and all of these other things? And then one other thing that I would say is maybe a red flag that we see a lot, especially with larger marketing agencies. One of our core values here at Blue Forge Marketing is ethical exclusivity. And what I mean by that is that we will never work with two HVAC contractors that are right on top of each other, right? Now, we're looking very heavily, of course, at maps. And so if we've got somebody that's in, a couple cities away and they may have overlapping service areas, that's one thing. But if I'm talking, we see this happen a lot where we've got a contractor we're evaluating and their marketing company is working with their closest competitor in the same city. And I think that that is a real problem. And we have seen with some of our larger competitors out there where as they grow, they get away from that, that email, right? That used to see, hey, we're only going to work with one company in this area. And, if that's not you, then it's going to be these three competitors and blah, 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 blah. And now they just work with anybody because we'd rather take the money than worry about the results, right? And worry about whether or not we can truly make you the dominant competitor in that particular space. And any thoughts on that here before we kind of move on to the next topic?
Yeah, I think it comes back to that core values alignment, right? So, when you talk about the people in your organization, the best practice seems to be to hire very slow and to fire fast. And I would say that the same thing could be said of your vendor partners, right? Your marketing partners or even your equipment suppliers. These are all the same kind of principles that will help you be good internally, will help you the other way. So if you're finding that these are problems with the agencies that you're interviewing, you're probably not being upfront with them about your core values and you're not understanding what theirs are because there might not be alignment there. And I think it's really important to understand more than just what's the boardroom in the poster and spit me out the 4 words that you chose. Give me examples. Give me behavioral context for what you're talking about. So tell me a time that you declined a competitive offer because you already had somebody in that space. And that would be a question I would ask of Blueforge. And I'm sure you have a long list of people where you could say, here are the people you could call who I turned down because I've already said yes to someone else first. And that actually means something. I think a lot of companies put up corporate values to feel good about themselves and tick off something on the leadership box, but they don't live and breathe it every day. And if you go up to anybody in the organization and ask them and they can't answer it, I think that's a bit of a challenge. So I think that that's really key in vetting your partners is making sure that they have values that are similar to yours and that there's alignment there. But more importantly, do you trust that they're delivering on these things? Because every company in the world has a very similar kind of ethos around we're transparent and we're honest and we're communicative and we're collaborative. What's that mean to you? Show me examples of where you promote or penalize things. And you don't have to share internal information, but just give me some proof that I can trust you about these values. I attended a very interesting webinar just earlier today, and you would not believe what the corporate values of Enron were right before it went down. So I think asking for an offer of proof is very, very prudent.
I really like that, and I couldn't agree more with you, honestly. I think the other thing too, when it comes to core values and core value alignment, right? I mean, just in the last 6 months, we've let go of a couple clients where we have decided we're not going to continue to work with these guys, and it's not because they're out doing anything egregious or ripping people off in the marketplace or anything like that. It really is like, guys, listen, when we started all of this, we were very, very clear in terms of, what you expect from us and what we need from you in order to really be able to work with you in a cohesive way. And invariably, if that relationship doesn't work, the results are going to be limited. And for us, results first is the number one core value, right? And if we can't generate results, because a client won't get out there and just ask for reviews, right? As an example, or we're not able to really get, updates in terms of like, what offers you guys running, what are you doing to consistently reactivate that database, keep your internal sales strong, whatever else. And it's just, we're not really getting anywhere. And I'll be honest, this tends to happen more in smaller companies than it does in companies with marketing departments. And I think that's where we'll kind of head next. But I think it's really important to also understand too, it's like, what are the circumstances under which a marketing company will stop taking my money? Because, many will not, right? And they'll just keep taking your money until you fire them. And so I couldn't agree more in terms of making sure that there really is that core values alignment and taking the time to really evaluate whether or not there's fit, just like I would with an employee, because I think your marketing partner can either be a real drain on your resources or the thing that really elevates your company and puts you into a whole new level of growth. And I want to talk a little bit more here too, Tom, or kind of segue into internal marketing maybe, or more particularly, how do you know when it's time to hire a marketing manager internally, and what should that look like? What type of scope should that person be responsible for at maybe various stages of your own growth?
Yeah, it's a tough question, but there are lots of signs when it's nearing or it's probably too late. So, and the too late one is really obvious, right? Where you realize that like the phone isn't ringing anymore, and that's a problem. And you should have been looking for the signs, 6, 12 months ago, or maybe earlier. Some companies have a very clear vision where they say, we're going to grow through M&A, and as part of that growth, we're going to need somebody who's very strategically minded. We're going to get a marketing agency or a marketing person in here who's going to help us manage that growth by understanding how brand plays work, by stratifying things, by helping us with the amalgamation, helping us with the branding, all of those different elements. And that all makes a whole lot of sense. But that's not the case for everybody. In many cases, it's just that slow, steady, purposeful growth from, one person to 2 to 5 to 10 to 15 to 20. Do you get to this point where you realize, holy boy, I'm out of my league all of a sudden. I don't know how to compete with my next biggest competitor. And the smallest guy, just seems so much smaller all of a sudden. And that's the space where, a lot of the climate care companies kind of find themselves. And this is where having a network of support can be very helpful. If you're looking for somebody internally, I think you've got to be looking at it from the perspective of you're doing regular business planning. You're looking, okay, I did 10 million this year. I want to grow 20%, next year. How am I going to do that? And I know that it's not just little operational tweaks. I'm not going to get a couple more reviews and a couple more referrals and a couple more Google ad clicks. I need a strategy here that's going to really help push to that level of growth. That's when bringing somebody in, I think, is probably beyond due. It would have been great to have somebody a couple years earlier to help you manage that growth and see that coming and make sure that you're staying profitable during that time. You don't ever want to be in firefighting mode. And that's the hard reality for a lot of HVAC companies, is that we're looking at that funnel, we're looking at that 3-day call board, and we're going, oh boy, I have no installs for next Friday. Like, let's get on the phones. Let's do some outbound dialing. Let's do whatever we can do. Let's do mailers. Let's do everything under the sun. When you find yourself knee-jerking and reacting to these kinds of challenges, sometimes it's a small operational glitch that you're able to fix. Sometimes it's because your marketing isn't working. You're not generating enough leads internally, and that's a problem, and we need to work on that. You're not bringing in enough new customers. That can be a problem. You're not squeezing enough juice out of your existing customers and mining that database and finding ways and reasons to provide value to those customers. That can be a challenge. All of these things are strategic issues, really. It shows up tactically, but it's usually because, like most tactical problems, it shows up because of a lack of strategy. So I would say the sooner that you get used to the rhythm of having somebody help you with marketing, whether that's a general manager who's, working a couple hours a week on it, right up to bringing in somebody full time to scaling it to multiple agencies externally, that's all a question of how aggressively you want to grow and how quickly you're willing to be successful.
Well, I like that answer quite a bit, and would kind of turn around and ask then, if we are at that place where we really are looking, getting past the general manager, putting in a couple hours, we really need to get somebody dedicated that it's just, that is going to be their job, is to make sure that our marketing is running on point at all times. What type of experience do you typically look for there? And what traits does that person, or what traits should that person really ought to have?
I'm going to ask that somebody be very, very data-driven and very analytical, because I fundamentally believe that marketing is a core business process. You have to understand the operation in order to funnel it and in order to make changes. So, and you look at this, you could look at marketing as kind of an octopus with its tentacles everywhere, right? It affects how we brand our vehicles. It affects the uniforms that we wear. It affects the words we choose when we answer the phone. It affects how we write our emails. It affects what our ads look like on Google and on Facebook, and the types of things we say and the voice we use when we're communicating with people. So if you don't fundamentally understand the operation first, I think that can be a bit of a challenge. And you tend to see this in marketing agencies that are extremely multidisciplinary. So I don't want to paint all home services industry with the same brush, But I can tell you, having come from a background outside of home services, my experience in IT and in consumer electronics has taught me very, very different lessons than my experience inside HVAC has taught me. And when I'm looking for somebody who can really help scale an HVAC business quickly and effectively through marketing, it needs to be somebody who understands that industry. And I think getting somebody who's more of a specialist than a generalist is going to be a huge win for you, because you're going to be able to speak with them in a much more natural language. You're going to be able to move a lot more quickly. I do think if you are looking for somebody, though, who's going to specifically take on marketing within your company, get somebody who has some understanding of that as well. And this is one of the challenges I think that's seen in a lot of industries, is that we take our best salesperson and we make them the sales manager, and we take our best manager and we make them, the director. And that's not always a winning strategy, right? That Peter principle tends to come into play, where we always promote somebody one station above where they're the most effective. And there's so many signs that we see that happening when they're going back and doing their old job. So be careful about that, right? What makes somebody really understand how to be a very good HVAC operator is not necessarily what's going to make them an excellent HVAC marketer. It might, in fact, be the opposite. You just want somebody who can work well with that person, understands their language, and they say the same things and believe the same things, but they have different skill sets. The things that you are particularly good at doing at Blue Forge are maybe not necessarily the same things that would make somebody very skilled at running the P&L side of an HVAC business. It's different skills.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I wouldn't know how to run the P&L side of an HVAC company, so I get that for sure. And one of the things that I see happen often, honestly, is that kind of we've got this person here. Maybe we started them out as a CSR, and something along those lines, and then we kind of handed the social media off to them because we don't really have a plan. And then, next thing you know, they're doing pretty good on the social media, and they're posting regularly, and they're responding to reviews. And let's go ahead and turn this person into the marketing manager now. When I see that happen, what I see is that there is such a huge learning curve to get from, posting on Facebook to understanding Lighthouse and being able to look through the analytics of something and have enough general awareness and understanding of what they're seeing to be able to actually make data-driven, educated decisions about things. And so I would encourage our listeners that, if you have the office manager, it really doesn't have a lot of experience in this data-driven decision-making, and you're making them into your marketing manager because it's convenient, to maybe reconsider, even if it's just getting a fractional CMO or something to, that point here, but somebody's got to be able to really look at this from a top level perspective and understand what they're looking at, and being able to talk with those vendors that you're using, be it SEO or ads or CTV or direct mail or, any of the different marketing channels that you can employ as an HVAC company. They really need to be able to be well-versed, I think, in at least understanding what's going on, what's really driving performance, and being able to make educated recommendations back to the owners of that particular company. Hey, based on what we're seeing here, I think we need to either replace this vendor, or we need to try this campaign, or we need to do this sort of thing. And just curious if you have any other kind of thoughts on the marketing manager, position side of it.
Tons. Yeah. I would say, for starters, just they have to be aware of everything. You might not find a marketing manager who is an expert at outbound calling and SEO and the Meta platform and Data Studio and analytics, as well as all of the other things that exist. But if you're not aware of what all of those things are and have some rough understanding of when these channels might be more effective, because there is a time and a place for this. Like a great SEO strategy is a critical strategy for online success, but you can't put all your eggs in one basket. It doesn't mean that because you have a phenomenal website that shows up at the top, you shouldn't do direct mail or outbound calling. I would argue exactly the opposite. So getting somebody who is aware of all of the things that you can do, I think, is very critical. And finding people who are genuine experts in their field is really where you need to go. And how quickly things are evolving right now, with machine learning certainly affecting that curve. but the amount of different channels that exist, customer expectations are heightened. How quickly word travels about good work as well as bad work, you really can't afford to be making poor decisions here. And I think one of the challenges that we see when we see these people being, maybe unjustifiably promoted into marketing manager roles, or we see that the wrong person is taking on that as a fractional part of their job as a branch manager or a general manager or a CSR, is that you're seeing a lot of bias there. And the bias you're seeing is that, it's that self thing, right? So I like to pick up the phone and call. So other people, therefore, must also want to pick up the phone and call. And we know that that's not true. We know that there's a whole group of folks out there who would much rather text you at 9 p.m. because they think it's rude to pick up the phone at 9 p.m. And hint, it's not always the people of a certain age or gender that you think. Like, the demographics are very, very scattered on this. So I think meeting your customer where they are is really, really, really critical. If you're only showing up in one place, I think it's going to be a bit of a problem. And I think that getting people who are experts who can tell you, here's how you should answer the phone for your call center, here's what your after hours experience looks like, have those people poke holes in your operation and show their expertise, absolutely critical.
You brought up a couple points that I also really appreciate: meeting the customer where they are, not putting your eggs all in one basket. What other tips do you have in terms of just marketing in general that people really ought to consider?
It's not about you. And that's a hard one. I feel like a lot of people, when they go to market, they're like, well, it's my company and it's my brand and I'm going to do it the way I want. And listen, if you want to line up a bunch of customers who look and feel exactly like you do, great. And, that'll be a very homogenous experience for you. But if you're actually trying to grow and you're interested in having more customers, then you have to appreciate that they're not all going to feel exactly the same way you do. Now, you might require some core value alignment to make sure that you don't have to fire your customer, or that maybe they believe something like you do, like we offer a premium product and demand a premium price. Great. That's absolutely your purview. But if you want to take a very narrow cast view of, I'm only going to show up here, and if you don't read my newspaper ad, I don't want to do business with you, I think that's silly. And I see that there's so many times that we see this kind of perspective. And it sounds, I know I used a very inflammatory and monochromatic example, but I did it by example to illustrate that that's literally the same thing as saying, I'm not putting a chatbot on my website, or I'm not installing this widget, or I'm not answering my phones after hours. These are the same decisions that we're making, is we're telling customers, you do business with us on our terms when we want, or you don't do business with us. And I think it's crazy. Like, I think we really need to start understanding the things that happen in other industries affect us. So in much the same way that, it's now reasonably commonplace for you to get a text message saying, hey, Tom, your technician Adam is on the way to your house. Great. That was a crazy idea 6 or 7 years ago. And now it's kind of expected. And I think it's very much the same thing when you look at whatever that next tool is, or whatever that next marketing strategy is. It could be booking service appointments online. Maybe you fundamentally think that that's a bad idea and that you want people to have to telephone. Not everyone feels the same way that you do as the business owner, and just appreciate that if you want to market to those people effectively, you have to be flexible. So you have to determine really, what do you want more of? A very rigid group of customers who all feel the same way you do? Or do you want to be able to genuinely serve the most people and do the most good and make the most money, and therefore be a little bit more flexible in your perspectives, that just because you like your hamburger, medium rare with extra pickles, doesn't mean everyone else does.
Yeah, I think that bias that you're referring to is really, really important to understand, because I've noticed that, obviously as a marketer in my own thinking, and we've traditionally worked with HVAC companies as the primary niche that we serve. And for the longest time, phone calls were where it's at, right? We get almost no form submissions. We throw a chatbot on a website and it just does nothing for us, kind of thing. What's fascinating though is that what I have definitely noticed as a trend is that when it comes to, let's say, installations, right? Most people would rather submit a form on your website. And I think that they're probably doing that because they're out doing the same thing with 3 or 4 other contractors to get competing bids, right? But it's just, if you don't have that availability, then it's not there, and you're not able to meet that customer where they live. And it's just as easy for them to go down to the next guy or gal, right? We're seeing a lot of female business owners now in the HVAC space, which is wonderful. So I don't want to, exclude either gender, but the point is that I think that if you're not meeting those customers where they are, and you don't have every availability, whether it's, text us here, right? Submit the form. Direct booking is now something that it is just absolutely huge. And I see, companies just really miss this altogether because we don't want people having control over our schedule, in essence, right? And man, what a huge opportunity to lose a lot of business, I think, when it comes to that. Just any other thoughts there, Tom?
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of that equity versus equality argument, right? So if you were building a structure for people to come in and visit, and you said, well, I built one stairway on the front of it, everybody therefore has equal access to my building, until somebody rolls up in a wheelchair and you haven't built a ramp. So treating people the same doesn't mean that you're treating them equally. So giving somebody a venue to be able to text you or to book online or to phone call or to come into your office or to do so at nighttime or on a weekend when you're, if you don't offer these availabilities, you're not treating everybody the same because you don't know their schedule. You don't know their communication preferences. You don't understand what might be challenging for them in these spaces. So trying to be inclusive on purpose rather than as an afterthought, I think is so critical. And you want to be able to capture the most amount of the market. And that doesn't mean that you have to take everybody as your customer. It just means that you're opening up the possibility for that. And if they don't match your core values and they don't like what you're about, that's okay. You don't have to engage with them. But why would you purposely say no before you ever got to say hi, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've been talking a lot about just advice here for contractors and that sort of thing. And I suspect that your experience here working with Climate Care has probably changed how you see a lot of things, especially around marketing, especially around operations. And if you were going to go back and talk to younger version of Tom, and say, hey, based on everything I know now, here's what I would tell you to do, what would that look like?
Yeah, I remember hearing many years ago, somebody had said, what's your favorite core value? And they had given a brilliant answer. And they had said, the most important value is courage. Because if you're not courageous, none of the other things that you believe are going to matter. Because when the push comes to shove, you're not going to be able to stand up for them. So I would say be courageous, believe in yourself. I came into this industry at almost 40 years old, having all sorts of experience elsewhere and not really knowing anything, and was able to learn quite a bit very, very rapidly. And when I think about some of the challenges that face a lot of the people that I work with and business owners in general, some of them are just afraid to be successful, and they'll never admit that, but you see it in their behavior. They're not willing always to take the risk that they could be right, or what will happen if we do this the right way. And I think that you need to be bold, right? History is certainly written by the first to get to somewhere. So if you have a really crazy idea, put it into your plan with other things and work with it and believe in yourself and just find ways to differentiate. And I think let your character come through. There was a brilliant marketing seminar I was part of a couple of years ago where they said, all right, here's a marketing strategy. And it's raise your hand if you're, Canadian in this case, or American. Raise your hand if your logo has a snowflake or a flame on it. It's like, raise your hand if your company says that it's family operated since 1970, whatever. And every single hand was up in the entire room. And that was the marketing strategy. And it's like, nobody cares. That's price of admission now. It's great that you're those things, and it's even important that you're those things, but you need to be different. And I think that we need to just embrace that. If I was going to give my younger self any advice, be courageous, trust in yourself, be audacious enough to be independent, and really chase those big things that you're looking for. And if you're a business owner listening to this podcast, that would be my number one thing is trust yourself. You got yourself this far. You can get yourself to be as successful as you can wildly dream. just don't be shy to ask for a little bit of help from experts along the way, because we're here for you too.
Excellent. Well, hey, Tom, this has been really, really fantastic. And if there's anything else that you'd like to say here in terms of, to those HVAC contractors, I mean, I'm not sure what better advice you might have, but, any other thoughts here as we wrap this up in terms of what else they really ought to be doing or looking at if they really are poised for growth and wanting to, build something more substantial in the marketplace?
Yeah, move quickly. I think would be my best advice. I mean, I don't think you need to be clairvoyant to read the tea leaves around you to see that like PE roll up is happening in this industry at a pace that we've never seen before. So if you want to position yourself to be ready to be the next person to be bought out and consumed, get going now. And if you want to position yourself to never let that happen to your business, and you want to find, a cooperative group of people who can protect your legacy, start planting those seeds right away. So take some time. I guess if I had one really big piece of advice for business owners, take some time and stop working in the business and start working on the business. If you're not calendaring time to be strategic about it, I promise you nobody else in your organization is. That really needs to come from the top down. So that would be my number one piece of advice would be, get working on your bigger picture plan, on your 1 year, 3 year, 10 year, and what all of that looks like, and start putting the time aside to make those things happen rather than working in firefighting mode all the time.
Yeah, I think that's really what I took out of everything that you've had to kind of say today is that, stop being reactionary first and foremost, right? And those who plan to fail, or excuse me, those who fail to plan to fail. And I think that is so true. And just from my own experience, we did our annual planning here about a month and a half ago for Blue Forge Marketing. And usually we've waited until, sometime between Christmas and New Year's, or maybe a little bit after New Year's, and decided to do that much earlier here at the beginning of fourth quarter, so that we're not getting wrapped up in the holidays and all these other things. But what was really fascinating to me is that as we sat and looked at we for the first time ever said, okay, what's our 10-year plan? Where do we see the company really being in 10 years, and what will the marketing look like then? And what will the number of employees look like then? And what will we be doing in annual top line revenue? And what will we be doing in EBITDA? And what's fascinating to me is that we sat down and we did those goals for 10 years, and then we did them for 3, and then we did the immediate goal for 1. And then since then, all of a sudden, Providence has really moved right along with that goal setting process, I would say. And I kind of have to chuckle about it because I think I dramatically underestimated what we can do in 10 years. And something about just taking the time to work on the business, to really get all of your people aligned, to make sure that we're all moving forward on the same set of core values, that we're resolving differences amongst our leadership team, amongst our employees, everything starts to work much more smoothly. I think everything starts to really compound on itself, both in terms of marketing and growth and just the culture of the organization. It's not too hard to tell that you've got quite a bit of experience implementing EOS, and because I'm catching those same overtones, if you will, of what happens there, and I really appreciated too your comment about fear of success, because if you genuinely ask people, are you afraid of failing? They might be honest with you half of the time and say, oh, yes, I am, or they may not and say, no, I'm not, but I have definitely noticed too with our clients and even in myself where, there's this idea that we don't want to get too big, or we don't want to grow too fast, right? Or there's all of these negative connotations that come along with success, maybe not the least of which being, gosh, look at all these extra taxes I'm going to have to pay. But I really, really appreciated what you had to say there, Tom. And I think this has just been incredible advice for those HVAC contractors that really are trying to grow. And I'll go ahead and wrap it up with that and say that this has been another, I think, wonderful edition of the Home Services Marketing Growth Acquisition Podcast. Again, my name is Adam Loveridge with Blue Forge Marketing. Been joined here by Tom Rand with Climate Care. And Tom, if somebody is up in the your neck of the woods and are maybe interested in finding out more about Climate Care or connecting with you, what would be a good way of going about that?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're a contractor and you're interested in what is this co-op all about and what's our group, visit our contractor website, which is www.joinclimatecare.com. And if you're looking to connect with me, you could find me on LinkedIn for sure.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, Tom. It's been wonderful having you on the show here. Again, my name is Adam Loveridge, and look forward to catching everybody on the next one.